Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Dibble March webinar. We're really pleased to have you here. I'm Kay Reed, the Executive Director of the Dibble Institute, and I want to say hello and acknowledge Kathy Gidry, our webinar coordinator. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Kay, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here with you.
Thank you. So today we have a really great webinar with Selma Kalal from Child Trends talking about how to reach Hispanic and Latino participants in our programs, and we thought this was really relevant given that many people in healthy relationship, fatherhood, pregnancy prevention programs work with Hispanic populations, and always a great way to tune up our game. But first, let me give you, so I want to do a quick show of hands. For those of you who are in the audience, you see the little hand thing? How many of you are brand new? This is your first Dibble webinar that you've ever attended. Can I get a show of hands? Okay, a few. Well, good. Well, welcome to the people who know us, and welcome to those of you who are brand new. We're really pleased to have you on the team. So Kathy, the next slide, let's talk a little bit then about Dibble, or the webinar. If you, for some reason, get bumped off your computer, there's a way you can call in. Please use the question box. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar, and we also will be doing some poll questions. So thank you for that. And then this webinar will be archived, and we'll talk more about that at the end. So let's give you a little more information about Dibble. So this is Charlie and Helen Dibble. It's not your most typical portrait, but I like it because it just shows this couple interacting. And Charlie and Helen were all about being a couple. They started the Dibble Institute. Charlie, who had done work as an engineer and then became a youth worker in his retirement, had seen how when family lives changed for his young friends, like parents' marriages got in trouble or they split up, that the trajectories for his young friends would change. And so he started doing research in the field of family life, and researchers were doing great work on what do we know that makes for long-lasting, stable, strong families and parental relationships. But when asked what they were doing for young people, they would often just shrug their shoulders. So Charlie had an idea that we could translate research into practice and make those materials available to people, to other people to implement, and that would help young people have better prospects in life. So on the next slide, so about 25 years ago, we started the Dibble Institute. We publish materials that are evidence-informed, and then we get them researched. So we have 2 on the evidence-based list now, which we're really thrilled with. But more importantly, we rely on people like you to go out into where young people are and really do this good work. So by our estimate, in the last 10 years, we've reached over 1.5 million young people with these relationship skills materials in schools and corrections and pregnancy prevention and all kinds of places. So anyway, like I said at the beginning, we're really glad that you are on the team. But let me discuss for a minute our core values, just so you understand where Dibble stands. So Kathy, the next slide. Primarily, our first and prime core value is we believe in research. We're an independent national nonprofit. We're not connected with any ideology, any religion, any political party, but we really believe in the power of research. So what that means is, as the research moves, as we get more knowledge, we will change our approach. So that happens not frequently, but from time to time we do revise. We revise our materials all the time, and as we get new information, we make that available. So that's a really core piece of the identity of the Dibble Institute, is our reliance on research. And secondly, we believe in, we're big fans of strong and stable families. We know from research that in general, when children are raised by their own two parents or their own two biological parents or their own two adopted parents in a stable and strong, long-lasted, committed relationship, including marriage, that they will often fare better than young people who are raised by a single parent. Now, this doesn't, but let me just say this really clearly. We have immense respect for the work that single parents do. Every day, putting one foot in front of the other, raising their kids, doing amazing, amazing work. And I'm sure you have, as I have in my own life, examples of people doing that good work. But even they would say it's really hard. It's really hard physically, emotionally, financially to do this on your own. Impossible? No. Hard? Yes. So our approach means no disrespect to single parents. And neither do we at all condone, relationships need to be safe and healthy. So if a relationship between parents or partners is violent or abusive of self or others or substances, then it's really better for children, and this is obviously, really obvious in literature, that it's really better for parents if those, or the children, if those relationships are split up. So we aren't like keep your family together at all costs. We're at keep your family together as long as it's healthy, and we all continue to work on our relationships. So, which brings us to the next point, which is we also believe that all people need to be treated with respect. There's not a time where we go out and do a public presentation that people don't ask us about how we pay attention to the needs of all young people. And this is how we do it. We make sure that everyone knows we believe everyone needs to be treated with respect, and all relationships can get better with relationship skills. So we write our materials intentionally to be inclusive, and our programs are actually used not only with young people. You never know who's in the room, right? So if you're in a school, there, of course, you have to assume that there's a certain percentage who are gay, bi, lesbian, trans, etc. But also our programs are used in programs that are specifically like runaway and homeless youth. There's a program in Florida that uses us with that exact population just by themselves. So we want you to know that this can be used, especially now that everyone can marry. This makes it even more important that everybody learns relationship skills. So let me talk a little bit about our presenter today, Dr. Selma Kalal. Dr. Kalal is a research scientist at Child Trends, and the really wonderful thing about her is that she combines on-the-ground experience, boots on the ground, with research background. So it's nice to have, somebody who's in the ivory tower, but still has her hiking boots on, as I like to say. And Selma, I don't even know if you like to hike, but she's done a lot of program evaluations. She's an expert in translating study findings into recommendations for people working in the field. And as I say, she has a lot of experience working with Latino families. So Selma, we're thrilled to have you here, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Kay, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Before I get started, I'd like to tell you a bit about Child Trends here. Child Trends is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research center that improves the lives and prospects of children and youth. Our corporate offices or main offices are here in the Washington, D.C. area. And Child Trends conducts high-quality research, and we intend to share the resulting knowledge with practitioners and policymakers. And so we take a whole child approach. We study children in the real world, and we want children to flourish. We value objectivity and rigor in our research, and we also we want to pursue knowledge and development, and so that we can give that information to others who are on the ground working with the populations that we care about. Next slide, please. So on today's webinar, I will provide you with some tips to tailor your outreach communication strategies to the needs and preferences of Latino and immigrant youth. tips and strategies to retain and engage Latino and immigrant youth in programming, and how you can use technology in these efforts. I will also provide you with some ideas on how to do real-time monitoring and how to effectively apply this practice to improve your program retention. Next slide, please. Now, the information that I will be sharing with you today comes from various sources in my work here at Child Trends. It comes from my extensive review of the literature and some national trends concerning Latinos that we have analyzed here at Child Trends. I'm also including findings from focus groups that I have conducted with Latino youth, ages 15 to 17, and also focus groups with young Latina adults and parents. I am also including information, so sort of compiling information from interviews that I have conducted with practitioners providing services to the Latino community. Next slide. Okay, so why create a communication strategy, or why have a strategy? As you may know, it is an important part to a program success. It is important for a program to meet its goals and capacity to serve your target population. A communication strategy is key to developing strong and lasting relationships with the community itself, but also with any partners in your community, other organizations. It could also streamline operations and really maximize the impact of the program's resources. Now, a well-crafted message attracts new people to a program. It clearly advertises the program, the purpose, the schedule, costs, and the eligibility requirements to be in the program. This message also makes it easier for potential participants to self-select for the program that meets their needs. Next slide, please. Now, before I go into this slide, I will be using Latino and Hispanic interchangeably. Because national surveys use the term Hispanic, I will be referring to the population as Hispanic when I'm presenting national data. At other times, I will use Latino, and sometimes you will catch me also using Hispanic, so we will use those interchangeably. But let's talk about why Latinos, why Latino communities. Latinos are the fastest growing and largest racial ethnic group in the country, as you may know. About 1/4 of all children today are Hispanic. In a few decades, they will represent 1/3 of the child population, roughly the same percentage as white children. Latinos are the largest racial ethnic group, so how today's children develop and grow will have an important implication for the future of our country. Unfortunately, many Latino children are growing up facing some challenges. We know that 2/3 live in low-income families, and roughly 1 in 3 live below the poverty level, which means that the majority of Latino children and youth in the country today form a part of the population that is served by policies and programs aimed at improving outcomes for children and youth. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit more about the recommendations that I have for you today based on the work that I've done with Latinos. Before starting any communication strategy to bring Latinos into your program, it is important to know your audience. Differences between communities are likely to influence how Latinos receive and interpret the messages and how they will respond to your outreach efforts. To get to know your audience, I recommend conducting an audience assessment. You'll want to understand the diversity of the community, their heritage and culture. Latinos are a heterogeneous group of people. As you may know, some Latinos have been here for multiple generations. Others have immigrated from different countries and have settled in different areas in the United States. It is also important to pay close attention to the language preferences of Latinos. Some Latinos may be bilingual, while others may be English dominant, and yet others may be Spanish dominant. Like in English-speaking countries, Latinos from different countries may use different words that have the same meaning, so it is important to know what the meanings are for your target population. So for example, in Mexico, the word chamaco is used for the word child. Well, this is not used in other Latin American countries. It is also important that you understand the needs of your Latino audience. relating to the services that you are providing, and also identify how they can access the information and what trusted sources they use to obtain the information that you will be giving them. Next slide, please. Now, many Latinos have a strong preference about how they self-identify. Based on our research, I recommend that you take note of the preferences that Latinos have so you can build your outreach efforts around their preferences. We know that messages that take into consideration the audience's preferences are more effective. So for example here, I have this graph here, and what this suggests is let Latinos self-identify. This may engage them more in your outreach effort. Well, most news outlets have opted to use Latino and Hispanic interchangeably. As you see in this graph, the very first one, most Latinos identify themselves by their family's country of origin. So for example, if you're looking at the fourth bar from the top to the bottom, about 57% of the community of people with Mexican heritage identify themselves as Mexicans. About 21% identify themselves as Hispanic or Latino, and about 21% identify themselves as American. And this is true for other group of folks. Now, I just wanted to get your attention to the pie right next to the graph. This pie gives us a sense of the diversity among Latinos living in the United States. As you see, the background of Latinos comes from different Latin American countries, with the majority coming from Mexico. Next slide, please. Now, to strengthen buy-in from Latinos, I recommend that you build partnerships and leverage influencers, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Partnering with well-respected, trusted community organizations, such as those serving youth and families, it's a good idea. We heard from our participants over and over that they are receptive to information when it comes from organizations they trust. Working with influencers can be another effective strategy to reach your Latino audience. An influencer is a person that families may turn to for advice and counsel, typically because this person has more knowledge or information or about any kind of questions that they may have. This influencer has the credibility to effectively give advice and also to call the family or for advice or action. Now, examples of influencer would be a teacher. Another example really comes from my work. When we do research here, the only way that we are fruitful and successful in terms of participant recruitment is that we go through organizations and we talk to the stakeholders, the influencers, and so that we can have a foot in the door with the population. And we are more likely to be heard when we come through those doors. Next slide, please. We also recommend that you take note of the community's preferences for outreach efforts. We have found that personal contact remains the most direct and effective way for service providers, and this is true across all ages. Personal contact, such as door-to-door visits, distributing flyers to people on the streets while explaining to the person about the information in the flyer, not just handing out the flyers and moving on. It's about that interaction that you have while you are distributing the flyer. Also, meeting parents and youth where they are, for example, at schools and school bus stops, and community events. And I recognize that these are labor intensive, but the research really suggests that these outreach efforts are effective to reach Latinos, especially the hard to reach audiences. Next slide, please. I also suggest reaching Latinos through the media sources they rely on most. We know from extensive research over the years that most people still use traditional media. And in fact, local TV news is the primary source of information across all the countries and ethnic racial groups. As you see here, about 90% of African Americans rely on local TV news, as 80% of whites do, and as 79% of Hispanics do. In addition, we also know that half of the Latino population relies on Spanish-specific news for information in their community. So once you find out the preferred language of your Latino population, you may want to try to get a spot in a radio station. Sometimes radio stations are able to give airtime at no cost. So partnering with a radio station would be a good way to reach your audience. And so before we go on to the next slide, what I would like to do is take a poll, and Kathy, maybe you can help me with this. Please let us know if your program staff uses social media. And I'm going to give you about 15 seconds for you to respond. So this one is, let us know if your program staff uses social media. And if so, which one do they use? You can do more than one. You can tell us there.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. There you go.
Oh, okay, good. So it seems like that a little more than half is already using some kind of social media. Facebook, Foursquare, it's the most popular one, and maybe about a third not using media yet. But maybe with these slides we can keep moving, and we're going to talk specifically about the advantages of using social media. The next slide, please. There we go. So take advantage of social media, I would say, especially when reaching out to younger Latinos. Like others in the country, Latinos are increasingly using local social media networks, I should say, such as Facebook, and this is just to stay in touch with family and friends. Organizations may want to consider how social media can fit into their outreach and communication strategy, especially if these organizations serve young adults. It can be a cost-effective way to communicate program information, and it can help develop rapport with the community and with the right population. Providers we interviewed, when we asked about social media, they thought that social media is very effective in engaging some of the Latino communities, particularly the younger youth. They did not think that it was very fruitful for other subsets of Latinos, particularly low income and parents. But for the young folks, for the young youth, they thought that it was pretty fruitful, and they liked using it. Okay, next slide, please. Now, in line with what providers said about social media use to reach youth, we see here in this graph at the top bar that young Latinos make up the greatest share of Hispanics who gets their news and information from social media. If you see this in the top bar, 7 out of every 10 Latinos ages 18 to 29 say they get news or news headlines from social networking sites. By contrast, only 1 out of every 10 Latino adults ages 65 and older do the same. So as age grows, the use of social media decreases. The graph also suggests that compared to their counterparts, low-income Latinos with less than a high school education, foreign-born, and Spanish-dominant are less likely to access social media. So I would say that the takeaway of this slide is that social media campaign can be most useful only for a subset of the Latino population: young adults, native-born, and English-dominant. Next slide, please. Now, more than ever, teens are online, as you may know. About 95% are online at this point. Looking demographically, we find that about 88% of Hispanic adolescents are online as well. Interestingly enough, internet access is high regardless of income. So the internet is being used across the board. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk a little about this figure. This figure, particularly within the black boxes that you see here, many low-income and foreign-born Latino families rely on cell phones. They are more likely to have a cell phone than a computer to access the internet. Because of this, organizations may want to optimize their websites for mobile devices. Consider using video on your websites as well as a way to inform users about your services and how they can reach you directly. We heard from focus group participants that videos of previous participants would be very effective. These videos would not only provide testimonials according to them, but they would also be a way to inform users about the services and how they can reach the services that they need. Now, before we move on to the other slide, what I would like to do is do another poll. And this poll, please let us know if your program staff currently texts with your participants. And again, we'll give you about 15 seconds to do so.
Okay, I'm going to close down the poll so we can move forward. There you go.
Oh,
Sonia.
good. Yeah, definitely. About 61% are using text and about 39 not using text. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about texting here. Texting can be an effective way to communicate with Latino youth. This same graph that I showed you before suggests that Latinos across demographics are using cell phones over computers. And what we are hearing is that texting is definitely in. Next slide, please. And the reason why I say this is because we have found that in general, research suggests that the volume of texting among adolescents is up, while time talking on the phone has gone down. When you text with teens, it's an extension of engagement specifically for a program. We are finding that organizations are increasingly using text to communicate with their program participants, and they are seeing positive results. That's what we're hearing. So, for example, a provider working with youth found that texting is one of the strongest communication tools that she has to privately or directly remind students or participants about when they need to be somewhere. Next slide, please. Text can be helpful to reinforce health messages. You can send a healthy tip of the day or of the week with a text. Text can be helpful to support your participants when they need to be in touch with you. They can also be helpful to increase class engagement, sort of like when you have teens or young adults, then they may have a question for you, but they don't feel so comfortable asking it in person. So it's one way to really extend that the program engagement. Now, studies have found that teens in general do not like to receive more than 2 texts from professionals, though. And what the studies have found is that the text needs to use an active voice and it needs to recommend specific actions. And also, I would caution you that to be careful of cost considerations. Many teens have unlimited plans. Some do not, and you don't really want to burden them with additional expenses. So poll them and to find out whether they do want to be texted. Next slide, please. Now, along the same lines, it is important to keep in mind that not all households have access to the internet. We talked about, using the internet or social media campaigns and things like that, but not all households have access to the internet. Lower-income families still lack a home computer or a smartphone, as I discussed before. And even in homes with where there's a computer or a smartphone, there's still some barriers to going online. Families sometimes may have reached their data plan limits, and so they are not able to use their phone and through the internet to the internet. They may experience interruption in services. They may have internet service plans that are not affordable, so they can't get on the internet with it. Families may have slow and aging devices, or they may need to share these devices with multiple family members. So again, getting to know your target population would help you, decide whether that's the route that you want to go, and see what kind of access your target population has. Next slide, please. Now, to optimize your outreach strategies, it is important to track your results to learn from your outreach strategies. And me being a researcher, I would say that keeping track of your communication efforts will allow you to really see where are you succeeding, and where you may need to tailor or adjust your communication efforts. This will help you gain the perspective about the whole process overall, what's working and what's not working, and also how to refine and improve your communication strategies altogether. Next slide, please. Now, so I've been, just sort of talking to you about all the strategies to get youth through the door. And so what I would like to do now is just kind of take some time to really go over some strategies based on research on the things that you can do to get Latino youth to come back and keep coming back to the program. So let's discuss some retention efforts. As you know, having a viable participant retention plan is key to any successful program. Retention rates have implications for the success of your program. We can go to the next slide, please. Now, in our review of evaluations, program evaluations, and also focus groups that I have done, I have found that transportation is key to retain program participants, and I'm sure that most of you would agree with this. This is a pretty common barrier, especially those that may benefit from the program the most. Those participants may have a hard time getting to the programs. Because of this, it is important to determine whether youth have transportation, and if needed, help your participants find safe transportation. We have also found through our work with programs and our focus groups with youth that the program location is key for retention. Teens need an accessible program and where they don't have to travel long distances, and also in places where they feel safe, a neighborhood where they can feel safe. Next slide, please. Now, I have also found in my review of the evaluations that being flexible to teens' schedule is important. As teens age, their after-school responsibilities increase, such as after-school work, extracurricular activities, and as we know, with Latino youth, also family responsibilities. As such, we suggest getting to know your participant schedule as early as possible and adjust the days and times of the program. In the focus groups, we heard from older participants how we can, programs can work around this. And they thought that providing sessions during the weekend and weeknights might be helpful, or giving them opportunities for them to sort of do makeup sessions. So when considering transportation, location, and program schedules, it is important to take into account the age of the participants. And you have to, think through where it is that you really need the help with the transportation. Now we can go to the next slide. It's the slide that says facilitate engagement between, voting with their feet. We can go back. Voting with their feet, youth engagement tactics. There we go. So in this slide, what I want to point out to you is that engaging youth in the program is another key component of participant retention. Studies show that one of the reasons teens attend out-of-school programs is to socialize with their peers. This is not surprising, as we know. the social development of teens. During adolescence, youth begin to look at their peers to socialize. So because of this, I would recommend program facilitators to encourage engagement between participants. A participant in one of our focus groups said that offering chill days will allow group participants to socialize and get to know each other. Smaller groups may also facilitate a more intimate social setting for youth to get to know each other and develop friendships as well. Now, also, we have found that providing the opportunity for youth to bring 1 to 2 friends encourages youth to keep coming back to the program. However, it's important that you do not recruit large group of friends, because sometimes if one of them drops out of the program, then the whole pack of friends will also drop out of the program. So what we're finding is just 1 or 2 friends. Now, evaluations and our own focus groups also suggest that youth do not want or enjoy passive activities similar to the ones that they do in school, and I'm sure that you have seen this before. They want lively, interactive activities, and this keeps them engaged. Our focus groups with them, participants, youth, thought that bringing guest speakers with real life experiences would be something that they would like. Also, allowing participants to ask questions and engage in a dialogue with the speakers and the facilitators is also another good way to engage youth. Also, games that encourage interaction between the participants are other ideas to engage youth. Next slide, please. Now, in the review of the literature that I've done and also the other work, I have found that engaging staff are just as powerful as staff are just as powerful as other key retention components that we have discussed so far. According to youth in the focus groups that we had, staff need to be genuinely caring and respectful. They need to be responsive to participants' needs and show this genuine enjoyment and dedication to their work. A way in which staff can show their dedication to their work is by participating in the program activities according to our participants. An engaging facilitator is also a good listener, is non-judgmental. A person who is engaging also is well-trained, who is knowledgeable and skillful at managing group dynamics, and also that they are able to kind of do some conflict resolution within the group. When staff represents youth's background and ethnicity, we have found in research that youth are more likely to feel comfortable, and this facilitates interaction between the participant and the staff. Okay, so just really quickly, another way to engage youth is to get youth input on the type of program facilitator they would prefer. They are the experts, and they can give you some ideas of what would be an ideal facilitator. Next page, please. Next slide. Now, the use of incentives has not been given a lot of attention in program evaluations, which is kind of a surprise to me, but there is some literature suggesting that incentives can be effective. We recommend using incentives strategically, though, and using a range of options to determine the type of incentives you may want to provide. It is important to consider factors such as the setting of your program, the age of your participants, and the size of your group. For example, in the focus groups, we have heard that community and internship hours are using those as incentives for program participation is welcomed. However, this type of incentive may not work for younger youth or youth who do not need these kinds of hours for school graduation. Here in Washington, D.C., they do need community hours to be able to graduate from high school. And so the youth told us that that would be a really good incentive if they can get community hours for participating in the program. While monetary incentives can be effective, programs need to really determine the appropriate amount. I think that it really varies as to where monetary incentives can be effective. For example, a $5 incentive per week may encourage younger youth to attend the weekly session, but if you're talking about an older youth who already holds a job, that may not be necessarily the case. So again, using incentives in a strategic way, also, always knowing what your target community needs are. What we are also finding is that basically all youth in our focus groups, and even our parent participants in our interviews and focus groups, is that Latino youth and parents do like food and refreshments, and so that is sort of like an incentive in and of itself if you provide food and refreshments, and also field trips can be sufficient for youth. Okay, so now we can move on to the next slide, please. Now, regardless of what type of incentive you choose to provide, it is important to communicate to your participants at the outset that the attendance that you expect from them, and also the type of incentives that they will get if you are using incentives. Next slide, please. Now, throughout the webinar so far, I have discussed different concepts to consider to improve your outreach and retention rates. Now, my hope is that from my discussion, I have conveyed to you that responding to the needs of your target population is key to program recruitment and retention. Because the needs of your target population may change over time, communication and retention strategies also need to be dynamic. One way to get an insight of your participants' needs is to conduct the real-time monitoring of your program. So your attendance records, you can use your attendance records because they do, from my perspective, hold a wealth of information on the factors that may be really influencing participants' attendance. By looking at your records, you can identify patterns in participants' attendance, and you may be able to discover the key to your retention challenges. So, for example, if you identify that your attendance drops when you have a certain activity, you can deduce that this type of activity might not be well-liked and may need to change course. Or you may find that your attendance increases when you have a specific facilitator, which might suggest that this is an engaging, well-liked facilitator, and you may want to enlist this facilitator more often. So obtaining information from program participants can also give you good information for your drops in attendance. I would suggest calling participants back immediately after a missed session, and in non-judgmental way ask the reason for the participant's absence, so that you will get some idea, some information as to why there is some lapse in the attendance. Also identify patterns of what your participants tell you about not only their attendance, but maybe anything else that might be getting in their way. As I discussed before, once you obtain the information, you need to understand your retention challenges and also, be open to make adjustments. All the things that I'm talking to you about today, there's always adjustments that one needs to make because the populations change, the communities change, and so from our perspective, communities, programs can adjust, can be dynamic as well. So just really quickly, the next slide, just some summary remarks here. An effective communication and retention strategy will help you determine how best to reach Latino populations most in need of services, and it would also guide you to effectively reach and engage Latinos. It will provide knowledge on how to establish consistent and productive and ongoing dialogues with the community, and it also can help you maximize the impact with the available financial resources that you may have. Ultimately, everything that I've said today is just to contribute to improve the lives and prospects of the largest and fastest growing racial ethnic group of children and youth, which is Latino population. And so with that, I think we're going to open the floor for questions.
Summer, would you like to point out before we do that, say something about the handouts?
Yes. So here we have two handouts that you can download. They're in PDF form, And one of them gives you sort of like a portrait of Hispanic children in the United States, sort of like their status at this point. And the other handout that we have is the Latino Communication Guide. That is the guide that we created from the focus groups that I conducted with Latino parents, and some of the literature review that I have conducted, more specifically around technology use and also youth. So those two are the handouts that we have today.
That's great. And you can find those handouts in the control panel. And what I'll also do is when I put the recording and the PDF of the webinar up on our website, I will also put those two handouts so that you can go back and look through those or download them if you don't get a chance to do those now. Okay, Kay, I think we're ready for questions.
Right.
Or comments by you.
Yeah, so while we're waiting for questions from our audience, because I know that you all in the audience seem to work a lot on pregnancy prevention, a lot on other health issues, social workers, and so you might have some questions while we have Selma here. But Selma, can you think of an example of a program reaching Latino young people, let's say 14 to 18, and what they're actually doing on the ground that you think is really best practices? Give an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a program that we interviewed, not the program itself, but some facilitators that we interviewed, that what they were doing, unfortunately, their program, they thought that the program was not specifically directed to Latinos, and it was not really incorporating a lot of the cultural things that they wanted, and they thought that it was needed because the population that they were working with was it's a very new immigrant population, and this was actually in North Carolina. And so what they were doing is they were incorporating a lot of group discussions around, what it's like to live in the United States as someone who has immigrated from another country, someone who comes with sort of like a Latin American culture and coming into a mainstream culture, and what that means to whatever topics the program was basically intending to target. So say, for instance, if they were talking about how men can be helpful in preventing pregnancy, they would talk about topics, anything that related to their perception of being men or youth, males, and what that was like in their own family and what that felt like being here in this country. So sort of, giving the youth a space for them to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
my understanding of that conversation, that interview that I had, is that helped youth keep coming back, because it, like I said like I found it in the research, that the more group discussion, the more interaction between the participants, the more they get to know each other, and they realize that, my peers are saying these sorts of things. This is really interesting. I never knew that my peer had this point of view. So I think it's the group discussions that I would say is the best way to engage them.
Interesting, because I would think that young people who were maybe the first in their families to be born in America or to have been brought here as children would be, as you say, in this space where during the day, at school they're in one reality, at home they're in a different reality. And what you're saying, I think, is if you have a place for those kind of youth to congregate, they all of a sudden realize they're not alone, their experience is not unique. So, So Maricela has a question, and I'm going to interpret this, Maricela, a little bit, and if it's wrong, just write it again. But Maricela asks, how do you engage youth on more, quote, taboo topics? And I'm assuming that means kind of culturally taboo topics, such as sex, abusive relationships, etc. So how do you bridge, and I've heard this in trainings before, where we have our standards, like American standards of what is abuse and what is not, and that might be different, look different in other places. So how do you, or expectations for sex, etc. So how do you engage young people on those topics that might be different than what they're being taught at home or experiencing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting. It's a very important question, I should say. And what I would say is that providing the space for youth to really think through what, let's say, spousal abuse, let's say that's the topic of the day, what spousal abuse means to them. And of course, they're going to, be speaking through their idea of what that is, and that will kind of give you some idea of the cultural kind of meaning to them. That's probably what they have learned, what they have heard, and so that's why they may have those perceptions. And I think that if a facilitator comes and says, may disagree or may be judgmental, that the young adult may close him or herself to continue to speak. I think that letting them really process that information, say it out loud, most likely there will always be another youth. If we're talking about a group format, someone else that will say, well, that's not true, because I think this is not not a good thing to do, and so on and so forth. And so they're going to be engaging in conversation, the back and forth. And so as a facilitator, is more just facilitating that perspective with hopefully the perspective of the other youth who has a different view. And so I guess I would say the goal is to have peer-to-peer conversations, always the facilitator guiding the conversation, and at the same time saying, what we know about healthy relationships, or what we know about, what works best, this is it. But instead of not making any comments about what the person said, but, have the peers kind of go at it, discuss it, and the facilitator being in neutral, but also having the message that this is what works best. This is what we know works best. Does that make sense?
Got it. So I think you're saying, present the information, present kind of where it comes from, and then let the young people discuss it, and you'll see that they'll be talking to each other in a way that perhaps the message will get through more clearly.
Yeah, I know that folks are supposed to be asking me questions, but I'm wondering, if this has been their experience. From my experience, what I've witnessed, going to do site visits and observing programs, there's always going to be youth that will have these traditional ideas that can become, abusive, if you will, and there's going to be the other youth that do not have those ideas, and so it's more powerful from what we know when they hear from their own peers,
sure,
than an adult who is maybe judging them. So I think that's the one way to go about it.
Okay, great. Any other questions from our audience? Well, this has been a really, really great topic, Selma, and we appreciate your generosity of time here, of sharing it with us. If you have other questions, we'll be responding to them. So if you, the participants, think of something, just type it in and we'll get back to you. But let's wrap this up. So just a couple of things, as we said before, this webinar will be available on our website, and we do encourage people, and we know that there's people here today, or who weren't here today, that will be wanting to listen to it, and it may be something that those of you who are in the audience want more of your staff to hear as well. So it will be there as well as the handouts and the actual PDF of the webinar. And if you have questions, you have Kathy and mine's email. Happy to work with you. So we will, because you've joined our webinar, we will be adding you to the Dibble email list. We publish a newsletter once a month with helpful hints and research and updates and funding streams. And so just plan on knowing that's going to start coming to you. But we're also on Facebook and LinkedIn, all the normal. We're trying to be modern, just like Selma says. So, and then also our email there and our phone number. So don't be a stranger. Stay in touch. And then next month, we're really happy to have our own Dixie Zitlow talking about how relationship education can create protective factors for disconnected youth, runaway, homeless, foster, etc. So populations we really care about, and helping to kind of understand what's going on under the hood when we teach them relationship skills and how that enhances the protective factors for them. So thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next month.